Mr Gregory, did you have any additional comments to make beyond your opening statement, which has been tabled?
A very brief comment.
Thank you.
And the rest just be tabled. I just want to thank the senators for hearing about this very important issue. We've been contacted by several people who've shared some terrible experiences, imprisonment under the Iranian regime, truly shocking stories. I'm representing the Australian Jewish Association, which is a membership-based Jewish communal organisation, largest Jewish organisation in Australia in terms of engagement, social media following, and a particular area we can speak about is Iranian human rights abuses against the Jewish community. It's something we've known about for a long time. The Iranian Revolution has hanged many Jewish people on trumped-up charges. The community, 150,000 people. It's now a tiny remnant, less than 5% of that. Jewish sites around the world, as we've heard earlier this morning, have been targeted by Iranian terrorist groups directed by the IRCG. We've had in Argentina, in Bulgaria, in our region, in Thailand. One of the reasons that in Australia, Jewish preschools, synagogues, and our community centres, you may have noticed they're protected by armed guards. It's from a fear of the Iranian regime sponsors terrorist organisations. And in our submission, obviously, and we're hearing today, there's many groups targeted, LGBT groups treated horribly, the Bahai people, and outside of Iran's borders, the regime is leaving a devastation in its wake. The brutal attack on Salman Rushdie came after Iran's fatwa on his head. That week, there were several attempted terrorist attacks in the United States. We can just look from Yemen to Syria, Lebanon to Iraq. We're seeing wherever Iran is, wherever the IRGC is, they're causing problems. Iran's one of the few countries to stand with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Iran's ambassador was recently expelled from Ukraine after Iranian suicide drones and missiles are terrorizing the civilians in Kiev. Albania has also expelled Iran's ambassador recently because of cyber hacking. This issue has also affected Australia. The Australian Cyber Security Centre, the ACSC, issued a warning about Iranian government-sponsored cyber attacks targeting Australian infrastructure, but we haven't seen any further action from the Australian government. So AJA strongly believes that Australia should be following our allies and that we must take robust action against Iranian human rights violations. Ideas like sanctions on individuals may feel like they're accomplishing something, but in our opinion, most of these individuals don't have business ties in Australia, and if they did, they've had so much time now that they would have, made other arrangements. So we've outlined 3 areas we think would have the greatest impact in signalling Australian displeasure with Iranian human rights violations, and one of those, as we've also been hearing today, is the IRGC. It's prescribing it as a terrorist organization, putting sanctions on it. The sole purpose of this group is to preserve the Iranian revolution. We think that by distinguishing this from the military, that can provide a strong signal that the IRGC is what's directing a lot of these attacks, a lot of these human rights violations. We think that sanctions on entities like the morality police and Iran's drone exports should of course be done, but they're unlikely to have the largest impact. Other issues we've raised is the fact that in 2010, Australia closed its trade office in Iran. However, in 2016, it was reopened with the hope that Iran had moderated its behavior. Clearly, this hasn't happened. We think, there's a question whether Australia should maintain an embassy in Iran, but if it chooses to do that, certainly there doesn't need to be a huge focus on trade with this regime. It can be kept for diplomatic purposes and other purposes, keep the lines of communication open. And lastly, the last thing we raised in our submission is we've been contacted with different information about educational ties between Australian universities and Iranian universities. Some apparently are sanctioned universities, so that are under United States sanctions. One where it's been alleged the morality police have been trained at an extremist university. Obviously, these are potentially inappropriate connections to be making. DFAT has a list of agreements between Australian universities and Iranian universities. And following us raising these concerns publicly, we were contacted by an Iranian woman who claimed she was bullied by regime loyalists at an Australian university when they found out she had a Jewish background. She claims the people were involved with the Iranian regime in Iran before they came to Australia. And this particular person, she alleges, still occupies a senior role at an Australian university. So we're urging a thorough investigation of the benefits and the risks regarding these Australian-Iranian educational ties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Gregory. Thank you.